Hello, BookTube. Recently, Michael K. Vaughan made an excellent video on the importance of the text that was his response to this recent fad of changing and censoring books in order to brush up their language and make it better align with modern sensibilities. That was the terminology that the publishers who were extorted into making those changes put out in their press releases. Michael K. Vaughan starts off his video right away by saying this is a bad idea. And I agree, but his video is excellent. I want to make sure that you knew about it, so I'll link to it down below. And it provoked a response from Shawn Standfast, and Shawn's response was also excellent. It confused me badly for 28 of its 30 minutes, but at minute 28, it got right where I wanted it to start. And this is all about changes that watchdog groups, that censorship groups, inclusivity groups went to publishers and insisted you should make these changes. Because if you don't, the thousands of followers that we have on social media are going to drag your name through the mud. We're going to say that if you don't make these changes, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're an ableist, you're a colonialist. If you don't make these changes, it was extortion. It was mighty nice publishing property you got here. Be ashamed if something were to happen to it. Publishers don't wake up in the morning and say, well, how can we lay out extra money for a property that we've been printing for 70 years? They don't do that. Publishers don't have any extra money. They make these kinds of decisions and then brush them up for public consumption if they're extorted to do so. And as a result, as I'm sure you've seen in the news, one author after another has fallen prey to one of the latest examples is P.G. Wodehouse, which is a prediction that I made on this channel before that was announced. In all cases, these changes are being described by the cowed publishers as changes designed to eliminate hurtful language and bring these books into greater alignment with present-day sensibilities. And the objections that have been made by the people who have objected have been, well, that's fine if you're cooperating with the author. If you've gone to the author and said, here, we want you to make these changes because this language is going to hurt your resale. Or we just bought, a movie studio just bought the rights to your work. They're not going to adapt it if we don't make these changes. Because they're going to want to bring out new editions for the public, and these books, these words, these phrases, these characterizations will be in there. And the author looks at that, is told basically by their publisher, this is going to hurt your bottom line, and says, go ahead and change them. Absolutely. Or grudgingly agrees to have them changed. That isn't what we're talking about here. One change was done, one of this fad, this wave of changes. I believe it's only in its infancy. I believe that in the rest of this year, we're going to see a lot more of this. One of the authors wasn't even consulted, and he's still alive. He was just told, your works are going to be changed. And I want to point out here that it's not fixing textual problems. That was one of the ways that Shawn Standfast's video confused me. We're not talking about textual emendation here. We're not talking about abridgments that are done without the author's knowledge or with the author dead and somebody thinks this original work is too long, so I'm going to abridge it. We're not talking about the editorial work done by some scholar in the field who goes back to the original published volumes that were done in magazine publication and picks out the differences between that and the eventual book publication, or even a scholar who goes back to the manuscripts of the author and says, well, from manuscript to the original serialization in a magazine, there are significant changes. I would like to print those so that you know what they are. As a scholarly endeavor, I want to print those so that you know what they are. We're not talking about that either. We're not talking about any of the subjects that fill the first 28 minutes of Shawn's video. We're talking about political censorship. We're talking about someone looking at a text and making political, not literary decisions on what they like and don't like while buzzing high on the dopamine high of bullying a multi-million-dollar corporation into doing what you say. That's a world of difference from a scholar coming up with an alternate wording or a publisher in the US deciding that a certain wording has to change in order to increase a book's marketability. That's a world of difference. This is, in other words, something that isn't verifiable one way or another. It isn't the right or the wrong side of history. It's one blue check mark on Twitter deciding, I don't like this, you had better change it, or else. And I can go through some of the examples that show what I'm talking about here. For instance, in Roald Dahl, references to mothers and fathers were updated to parents and family. And you can see the politics involved there, right? Because, Terry has two fathers. Because some parents are you have two mothers, or you have two fathers, or you have only one father, or only one mother. Also, in the same book, Ladies and Gentlemen was changed to folks. That's not the same thing as mothers and fathers being changed to parents. Ladies and Gentlemen being changed to folks is a political decision. It's a political expression of the political belief of the person demanding the change that humans come in some other form. It's a political statement that when it comes to humans, there are ladies, there are gentlemen, and there are other things. There aren't. The contention that there's something other than male and female is non-scientific. It's a political decision. It's a political position on the part of the person who wants to make you parrot it. The publisher is not going to do that. The publisher, and you and me and any other person that you happen to meet on the street, and any other person in 250,000 years of American life or human life, is going to say, yeah, ladies, gentlemen, there isn't anything else. Nevertheless, that was the change that was proposed. But also, I want to point out the one that's the most disturbing. The one where the pressure groups that are causing this to happen really show their hand. The original passage in Matilda by Roald Dahl is, she went on olden day sailing ships with Joseph Conrad. She went to Africa with Ernest Hemingway and to India with Rudyard Kipling. And that passage was proposed to be changed to, she went to 19th century estates with Jane Austen. She went to Africa with Ernest Hemingway and California with John Steinbeck. Conrad and Kipling are written out by people, by one person who demanded this change, who has never read Conrad and never read Kipling. That person only knows that they're on the wrong side of history. This isn't going to age well. Yikes. Read The Room. I was X years old. I was today years old when I found out that Kipling was part of the Raj. Whatever. Those changes have nothing to do with marketability of Matilda. They have nothing to do with anything verifiable in fact. If the mentions here of Conrad and Kipling were instead two 19th century authors that are completely forgotten, that no one has ever heard of, it still wouldn't be justifiable, but at least it would be factual. At least the person who's demanding this change, or else, mighty nice publishing IP you got here, it'd be a shame if something were to happen to it, at least that person would be able to point to an actual verifiable fact. That Matilda mentions Marty Furness. No one's heard of him in 100 years. He hasn't been reprinted in 100 years. No one reads him or has ever heard his name in 2023. So at least that person could factually say, we should change that name because it's going to just cause a question mark on the part of the reader. People have heard of Conrad, and they have heard of Kipling. The person making this change is saying, people have heard of Conrad and they've heard of Kipling, but I don't like those authors. So I want them gone from this text. And replaced, Ernest Hemingway gets to stay. Because, again, I want to point out, the blue-haired activist, the fascist who is insisting on these changes, does not read anything. They do not read anything. Even the books by their so-called allies, they don't read anything. Hemingway gets to stay, and the reason that I know they don't read is because if they did, they would know about Hemingway's anti-Semitism and his misogyny. If Conrad is not acceptable, then Hemingway is not acceptable, but he gets to stay, and he gets company with John Steinbeck. And again, I read this. I'm not a big fan of Hemingway. I'm not a big fan of Steinbeck. I am a big fan of Kipling. I'm not a big fan of Joseph Conrad. But for the person to substitute John Steinbeck leads me to believe that the fascist who did this, the blue checkmark fascist who did this, the censor who put John Steinbeck in here instead of Rudyard Kipling, doesn't have any idea how many women Steinbeck belted across the face in his life as an adult. And the point I'm trying to make is that that is ideological. That is political. In any case, no matter what, these kinds of changes are political. So when Shawn Standfast says in his video, that at the end of his video, he says that he's just trying to muddy the waters a bit on this issue, he says it's not a clear-cut issue. I have to disagree with my friend Shawn. First of all, it is a clear-cut issue. It's completely clear-cut. When, as he says in minute 28 of his own video, when a person is making changes because they don't like the wording, that's wrong. That's bad. That's evil. That's fascism. That's censorship. That should be opposed by every literate and literary person on fundamentally unmovable grounds. Your answer to that should not be, well, it's a case-by-case basis, or it's really complex, or it's been going on for a long time, or, yeah, this isn't the first time, or anything. It should be just a flat no. A flat no. It should be Salman Rushdie's response. It should be no. This is absurd. It's depressed me in the last 2 months how many book-related people, especially on social media, have come forward to sort of say, yeah, go ahead and do this. Yeah, absolutely. Get these words out of my sight. I've had interactions with some of them on Twitter because they were people that I thought were not fascist quislings. Now I know they are. I stopped giving responses because there's no way for you to talk someone out of being a fascist quisling. And so as a result, I do not understand the value of muddying the water on an issue that is not muddy. In my opinion, the first 28 minutes of Shawn Standfast's video simply aid fascism. If you muddy a cause that isn't muddy, you are only helping the bad guys. You're only helping the bad side of this argument, whether it wins or not. I have a sinking feeling, that it is going to win, because it just keeps happening, one author after another. I mentioned P.G. Wodehouse, but I also mentioned Shakespeare and Mark Twain, who are gigantic targets for this sort of thing. And once again, in this, as with movies or TV reboots or Gillette razors or now Budweiser Light, in all cases, the absolute fundamental enabling factor is the weakness, the fear of multi-million-dollar corporations who don't have anything to fear from 12 psychos on Twitter. They think they do. Those 12 psychos on Twitter tell them that they have plenty to fear, but they don't. They don't. Just ignore it. If you just ignore it, then you don't have to do any of this. As opposed to, is it Puffin that has the rights to Roald Dahl, announcing that they will come out with 2 versions? So they have now doubled the expense that they got out of bed not thinking they would have it all. They've now doubled it, because they'll have new editions of the work that have the fascist censored versions, and then they'll have the original version. And it has been very depressing to me how many book-associated people have read all about this, seen what they should clearly view as an enemy to everything they hold dear. And instead, the first thing out of their mouth is, well, Agatha Christie changed the time. I don't care. I don't care at all. This is not a muddied issue. This is pressure groups making changes in text for political reasons. Do you like Rudyard Kipling? Do you like Joseph Conrad? Do you want the new edition of Matilda to call you a bad person for that? On the say-so of someone who's read nothing? Who hasn't read those authors? Anyway, eventually, at minute 28, Shawn does come around to saying this is wrong. This is just wrong. I would have liked it if that had been in minute 1, but it is in minute 1. In fact, it's in second 1 of Michael K. Vaughan's video. So, taken together, we are still presenting something of a united front. But when I saw this discussion, the video and the response, I had to make a response of my own. What I'm describing to you here is horrifying and loathsome. It does not have a precedent except in fascist countries. The fact that fascist countries or the fascist movements in free countries have done this does not mean that it's, I'm just being blasé. Why are you getting so worked up? This happens all the time. Plenty of horrible things also have precedents. And there is a state at which historical blasé attitudes aid present-day evil. So that's why I'm getting all worked up, because this is absolutely horrifyingly wrong. And not an ambiguous issue at all. So I thought I'd make a little bit of a rabble-rousing response on my own. The text is important, and I guarantee you, if you are in the same boat as a lot of the literary aligned people that I've seen on social media, and the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the text is important is, well, according to who? Or, scholars are changing things all the time. Or, translation can muddy things up. Or, this kind of censorship has happened before. This happened before. What point are you trying to make in telling me that this horrible thing has happened before? That you're okay with it now? I'm not okay with it now, and I don't see any value in muddying the water of an issue that is as clear gets. I believe it will get more clear as the year goes on, as more and more works are targeted. I don't know what it will take. to bring around a lot of the people on social media I have seen that seem to be uttering some sort of mealy-mouthed quasi-contextualizing defense of this offense. I don't know what it will take. It's basically a schoolmarmish attitude on the part of the fascist ideologues that are doing this. They're going to publishing houses and say, you'd better make these changes or else. Pretty nice IP you got here. Be ashamed if something were to happen to it. And pointing at their Twitter following, it's the disgrace of an afternoon. You should not capitulate if you have a multi-million-dollar product. The idea of cleaning up James Bond novels is just, it's offensive on every possible level. The foremost one for me being that the people who are insisting on these changes do not read. They do not read. So since they don't read, I'm just wondering what it will take to bring around the compulsive contextualizers. Will they have to go after Cormac McCarthy? These are school marms. These are ideological censors. What if they decide, a proper book has quotation marks and regular punctuation? And these books don't. So we're going to add them. We're insisting that Cormac McCarthy's publishers add quotation marks and regular punctuation. And if they don't, well, it'd be a shame. Maybe that would do it. But I don't know. I have no idea. I just wanted to add my 2 cents worth that the text is important, and that what we're seeing here is not the same thing as textual emendation or scholarly discoveries or the vagaries of translation or the politics of abridgment or consultations with living authors. What we're seeing here is not that. Ladies and gentlemen being changed to folks is not that. This is something radically different. This is not, this wording is no longer acceptable. This worldview is no longer acceptable. You change Conrad to John Steinbeck, you're saying a worldview is no longer acceptable. And you're doing it for explicitly political reasons. What if you don't agree with that person's politics? Anyway, I'm gonna stop before I muddy the waters, so I will wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.